Canadian soldiers have served this country with distinction all over the world in times of peace and war. We honor them with parades and solemn ceremonies. What we don't see is some of our men and women in uniform have trouble making the transition to civilian life. A recent study shows thousands of Canadian veterans are now homeless and struggling to survive. Here's Vashi Capellos.
The underbelly of a city, and the people who live there.
Remember, I used to feed the birds. They used to come first thing in the morning, and when they start chirping.
Often forgotten, their stories are rarely told.
We don't even make newspapers when we die. You know? We don't get obits. We don't get nothing.
But does it make a difference knowing that some had once served this country?
When you're in the forces, you always had somebody watching your back. All of a sudden, there's nobody, you know.
It's a crisis that's been ignored for decades. Homelessness amongst Canadian veterans. Lorne Lorenzen says he was stationed with the Princess Patricias in Alberta for 5 years.
Were you ever injured in the military?
Yeah.
He doesn't like to talk about his time in the service, but after he got out, Lorne says he was homeless for 32 years. He lived in this alley.
That's where I slept, eh? Underneath that, see that, where the overhang is there?
Hidden from the world, Lorne met Trish Dribnenke, an outreach nurse in Calgary 2 years ago.
This is where we cooked, right there. Listen to music and cook with the wok, yeah.
She helped him get off the street. Lorne says he served his country. Then he was forgotten.
It's not really something I'd want to live through again.
Whether in peace or at war, overseas or at home, when veterans fall, who is there to pick them up?
A lot of these guys, they took a real chance signing up and joining because they were Canadian, because they believed in that. You know, I think it's the right thing for Canadians to take care of the vets.
So we're going to come across a lot of people, and I would suggest to get your tickets out.
But to take care of them, Canada has to find them.
Vets Canada is an organization that goes in search of veterans who are homeless or maybe at risk of homelessness.
And for this woman, it's personal.
My husband Jim is a veteran himself, and he was medically released from the military and struggling to find his next purpose in life. So he went to a Sunday supper at a church in Halifax, and he found a gentleman that he had served with in the military, and that gentleman was there getting a hot meal. I think that's tragic. It really is tragic.
Whenever they can, Debbie Lowther and her team of volunteers patrol cities looking for those in need.
We're looking for some veterans.
Yeah.
Yeah? Do you know of any?
Yeah, my uncle is.
Your uncle's a veteran?
Yeah.
Take care. We went to Veterans Affairs, and their reaction was, "You're wrong. There are no homeless veterans."
That was 6 years ago. Since then, she's spoken to at least 1,000 vets.
I did the Gulf War as well, brother. Pleasure to meet you.
We found a veteran not that long ago in Ottawa who served 37 years with the RCMP. And he was living in a shelter in Ottawa, but he, through a series of events, wound up on the streets, suffering a lot of depression, and just didn't know how to get himself out of there.
Her volunteers are mostly veterans, and the idea of a homeless brother can penetrate the toughest exterior.
One of the sayings that we have is that the men and women who protected our home should not be without one. So it's very important.
It took some time, but last year the federal government completed a report suggesting over 2,000 veterans are using homeless shelters in Canada.
I feel comfortable in saying that it's probably closer to 10 to 15,000.
That is a busy spot. You will always find people there.
And many prefer to remain unseen.
A lot of them don't use the shelter system because they have those good survival skills. So they're more apt to, live in their car or live in a tent in the bush kind of thing. Nobody chooses to be on the streets. They're there because of a series of circumstances that led them there.
How many veterans would you say that are on the streets right now?
Probably about 30.
30.
Wow. Wow. Are they all over the place, or are they?
In the hood. I've seen some on the West End. I've seen them all over.
They do feel a lot of shame about where they may have ended up after their military career ended.
Life in the military is about routine, structure. And losing that can be devastating.
When they left, often a little bit of a difficult transition back to civilian life.
Cheryl Forchuk was one of the first people in Canada to research homeless veterans. She says many feel shame with how far they've fallen.
There's many layers to the onion, and certainly that idea of reclaiming the dignity and self-respect. It's like you got a crisis happening in slow motion.
Unlike some other populations, for vets, it's often a slow spiral into homelessness.
Like a good decade often between the time they leave the service and the time they end up homeless, sometimes 20 years.
That long descent also means homeless veterans are often older than homeless non-veterans, many over the age of 65.
When they hit that point, they were in very serious trouble because they had lost their family and that support. They had lost their post-service employment.
It would be at night that Lorne felt most alone. He, like others, had fallen through the cracks.
They feel isolated, and they feel alone, and they feel like maybe they've been betrayed or let down.
Is that how you felt? Did you feel betrayed? Let down?
Sometimes in a way.
Last year, Lorne was diagnosed with PTSD and is now getting help.
To give me some support kicking in, maybe, coming down the road.
And he's even gotten his own apartment.
An address and a real, my name on a lease, that is my apartment. First time in 32 years.
But thousands more are in need. There are services available to veterans when they leave the military, but they can be hard to access, especially if someone is homeless.
It's a long, difficult process, and to be honest, the fight's gone out of them.
They were trained for war. They weren't always trained for life after. This man goes by Walrus. He quickly opens up to his fellow veterans.
We're all brothers. All done it. Yeah.
He's a Canadian veteran who served in Vietnam, actually. And he's living on the streets with cancer. He's got PTSD.
It's a bonding experience, a connection in sacrifice and pain, one of their own left behind.
Well, definitely be by to say hi for sure.
Every time we get down here, we'll look for it.
It was just really emotional.
Debbie offers to get Walrus off the street and into a hotel for the night, but he refuses.
Oh, you're not leaving without a hug from all your brothers.
He said that he was too proud to ask for help, so he's going to stay where he is. So our volunteers are going to keep checking on him.
And so his fight for survival continues.
Next, finding a home for homeless vets.
These people want to congregate, they want to reconnect with their military culture, and they can't do that in a homeless shelter.
In the morning, they're really chirpy and sing. When they wake up in the morning, they're happy immediately, you know? For me, it takes a little longer sometimes to get going. When I was in the Southern Ocean, you had the albatross just back and forth all day.
Peter Pauly likes to be reminded of his time in the service.
1968, joined the Navy as an ordinary seaman.
He spent 12 years in the Navy and would rather be on water than land.
For me, just the solitude, the beauty, sunrise, sunset. I just enjoyed it. When I left the Navy, 1980 or 79, my final release date was 1980. Back at sea again. Back at sea.
He traveled the world, but then the jobs dried up.
When the shipyards closed, all my clients didn't have the money anymore. So I lost a lot of income.
And soon Peter was left desperate to find work.
Just because you're great in the military and you're well thought of, it doesn't mean that you're employable on the outside, because what have you got to bring?
He made his way to Calgary and tried to get odd jobs, but nothing stuck.
I couldn't keep a place. I'd rather drink than pay rent. I didn't like that job anyway. Back to a shelter.
By 2000, he was on the street.
I should know better, you know?
Homelessness in Canada has been a problem for decades, and one thing that would help is housing. This is the Madison, a home specifically for homeless veterans. It opened in 2012. 15 vets live here, and when they all get together, talk usually revolves around the good old days.
What do you call them, Peter? Rents? Anchor clanker?
Pongos.
Yeah, Pongo.
That too, yes. I haven't heard that word for ages.
Homeless vets are in almost every major city, but there are only 4 programs like this in Canada.
I've been living on and off in the shelters for 5 years, so I didn't even know about this place. One of the workers from home base told me about this. And I said, no, they won't take me.
One of the things that we really found is that we can't use the same kind of programming as we use for other people, that these people want to congregate, they want to reconnect with their military culture, and they can't do that in a homeless shelter.
But they can do that here, in a home that helps them regain some of the respect they may have lost on the street.
Being in the military almost gives you a purpose, too, and it's something to be proud of. I tried a civilian job for a little bit. Didn't go so well. And I'm sure you guys know, right? Out of fluke, I applied to the Calgary Police, and they were crazy enough to hire me.
Constable Paul Fisher with the Calgary Police Service first met some of these guys when they were on the street, homeless. He also served with the Canadian Armed Forces.
So that's my Afghanistan medal for serving over to Afghanistan. It's the SWASM.
The medals on his police uniform are a sign to other vets, a symbol of the bond they share.
If a military veteran is homeless and I'm talking to him, he's going to say, hey, what's your SSM for? Or, you know, what'd you do?
Not every veteran went overseas. In fact, some of the guys at the Madison didn't. But to Paul, that doesn't matter. A vet is a vet, and he wants to find those that have fallen behind.
When it's quiet and there's no call to rush to right away, I'll make a point of going to areas that are frequented by somebody that might be homeless and try to engage them in conversation and see who I'm talking to. Hey, buddy.
An estimated 6% of Alberta's homeless population could be veterans.
Hey, boss. Good, buddy. How you doing, Frenchie?
Not bad.
Yeah, you're looking good.
And how they got there is part of some new research.
The relationship between being homeless and being part of the military we found was not a straight line.
Cheryl Forchuk has found that for many veterans, being in the forces was the best time of their life, and the transition to being a civilian can be difficult.
This is a much more convoluted line. You're in the military enjoying it, it's the best time of your life, but it's planted the seed at the same time where you're starting into this heavy drinking.
She compares it to an onion: alcoholism, depression, anxiety, battle after battle that could leave veterans vulnerable, struggles that could be caught earlier.
While we're screening for things such as PTSD, we also need to be screening as people are released from the services for substance use, because we do have that long window for potential intervention.
Man, then you're fighting addictions, you're fighting homelessness. Your health is down. All of these should be addressed before they become like I was.
What's your responsibility specifically as Minister of Veterans Affairs to homeless veterans?
Look, at the end of the day, they're a Canadian who have done our nation proud by serving in our military. No, we can't tie their injury or illness to military service. We have no obligation. That's not what we want to do. We want to take a broad approach to this. I think our department has the capacity to do better.
Veterans Affairs has called homeless veterans a priority, but the Madison is paid for in large part by the province of Alberta. Local charities and legions provide furniture, food, or clothing.
It'd be nice to see Veterans Affairs get more involved, because all the times in shelters I never saw Veterans Affairs. They said that they do go down there.
Still, it's not enough. More is needed.
Oh, there's a lot of memories in this whole area.
Jerry Zalischuk needed a place to live.
Like this town here, you need 7 guys to rent a place around here, you know. You come along and the cheapest you can find is $1,250, $1,300. That's a lot of money. And if you're a veteran, you don't have that kind of money, unless you won the lottery.
But a place to live is more than just a place to sleep. It's a home.
This place right here, I feel like a millionaire, you know?
Jerry moved into the Madison over 2 years ago.
You see that tree there? I was there all the time, and I used to sleep under that tree. Now it's going to be a doggy park.
Jerry was homeless for almost 20 years, camping in parks like this one. He says he has cancer, cataracts, and suffered multiple heart attacks.
End up by yourself. And that's where things really go wrong, because you don't ask for help, eh? And you're too, I guess you'd call it proud to ask for help. 75,
okay.
All 65.
Okay. Much better today than yesterday, eh?
Yeah.
Now, the 71-year-old is getting the help he needs, because at the Madison, the veterans are not alone.
Here, if you got a problem and you might want to pick up a jug, you can come down here and say, And
you're so true.
And they'll talk to you.
And taking veterans off the street and getting them into a home saves hundreds of thousands of dollars in hospital, police, shelter, and emergency costs.
Catch them before they get a shopping cart. I think that's critical. It's cheaper, and then you get somebody productive into society again.
Will we see more Madisons?
Can I commit today that you're going to see these all over the nation? No, but I can tell you this. I understand the importance of the work they're doing at Madison House. You know, I'm open-minded, and I understand that these places are working.
And yet, for these men, even the smallest of actions can make a difference.
You go in, and they say, anybody here served. So you put up your hand, they all stand, and clap.
they didn't get me into this place here, then I wouldn't be alive today. I know that for a fact.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. That is our broadcast for tonight. A reminder, you can always connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter or at globalnews.ca/16by9. I'm Donna Friesen. From all of us here at 16 by 9, thanks for watching. Canadian soldiers have served this country with distinction all over the world in times of peace and war. We honor them with parades and solemn ceremonies. What we don't see is some of our men and women in uniform have trouble making the transition to civilian life. A recent study shows thousands of Canadian veterans are now homeless and struggling to survive. Here's Vashi Capella.
When you're in the forces, you always had somebody watching your back. All of a sudden, there's nobody, you know.
It's a crisis that's been ignored for decades, homelessness amongst Canadian veterans. Lauren Lorenzen says he was stationed with the Princess Patricias in Alberta for 5 years.
Were you ever injured in the military?
Yeah.
He doesn't like to talk about his time in the service, but after he got out, Lauren says he was homeless for 32 years. He lived in this alley.
That's where I slept, eh? Underneath that, see that, where the overhang is there?
Hidden from the world, Lauren met Trish Dribnenke, an outreach nurse in Calgary 2 years ago.
This is where we cooked, right there. Listen to music and cook with the wok.
The underbelly of a city. And the people who live there.
Remember, I used to feed the birds. They used to come first thing in the morning, and when they start chirping.
Often forgotten, their stories are rarely told.
We don't even make newspapers when we die. You know? We don't get obits. We don't get nothing.
But does it make a difference knowing that some had once served this country